Plants require 16 different elements to grow, and these are just categorized into macronutrients and micronutrients.
You're listening to How to Hydroponic with Ryan and Tessa.
This is episode 7 of this series, and we're talking all about nutrients, pH, and EC. If those sound like foreign terms, don't worry. We're going to be breaking them down and make it super simple, and not overcomplicated, not sciencey. So this is going to be a great episode. We're going to cover lots of things.
Yes. We'll do our best because nutrients is when you start to get into the world of like chemistry and botany. And we found as we dove into it, it's very easy to get overwhelmed and then kind of leave it like, I don't feel like I know anything more than when I started. So we're going to at least try and distill it into the things you need to know and then how to make a decision based on that. Because if you kind of follow a formula, it's not too bad.
It's not bad at all.
So it's not bad at all.
So we're just gonna give you guys, this is the most important things. First and foremost is just starting with nutrients in general. Plants require 16 different elements to grow, and these are just categorized into macronutrients and micronutrients. They are equally as important. What's kind of like determines or differentiates them is macro, the plant needs in very large quantities. And the most common, you have actually 7 of these macronutrients, the most common being your NPK, which is your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And you'll see that like NPK ratio on everything. Those large quantities.
And then the ones that you don't need in large quantities are called micronutrients. There's 9 of them. And again, these are just as important, where if they're missing, even though they're small, it'll have a lot of bad effects on your plants. But they're just not needed in the same amounts as those macronutrients. And this would be things like zinc, copper, boron. And again, all of these are needed. And typically when you grow in soil, these are sort of assumed in the soil, but since we're starting off with completely clean water, we're going to have to add all of this into our hydroponic system.
Now, with nutrients, there is a large variety out there, and with hydroponics, as we explained in an earlier episode, is a lot of people just assume that because you're adding to the water, it's always synthetic. And so we're going to go over the different types. There's going to be synthetic, all natural, and organic nutrients, the difference between them, and what ones kind of you want to use.
So, of course, like Tessa said, not all hydroponic nutrients are synthetic. When we talk synthetic, a synthetic nutrient is one that's been chemically manufactured, typically in a laboratory. And a big difference between it is man-made. Typically, you derive it out of some other component that was natural. You take out one piece and now it's become synthetic. The nice thing about synthetics are these are the most pure form of whatever that element is. So you get very, very precise amounts, but there is sort of a little bit of a uncomfortableness about messing with nature too much.
Yes. Then you can get all natural nutrients, and these are derived of salts and minerals, but we can't call them organic, and that is because salt and mineral, it's not living, and it's not breathing, therefore it cannot be categorized as organic. And so the all natural, although nutrients they're made of salts and minerals, and it's a great nutrients. These this is normally our favorite type of nutrients. It's clean and it's in a pure form that the plants can absorb right away.
Exactly. And you haven't done any chemical processes to alter it whatsoever, so it still stays very natural. The final one would be organic. So organic nutrients will typically come from sources like fish emulsion, seaweed extract, worm casing, bone meal, blood meal. And these nutrients are organic, and then they get broken down by microbes into something that the plant can actually use. They have their pros and cons. I would say the pro is you're using something that's completely natural as well as it's come from a living thing. There's sort of a reputation with organic being better. So if that's something you're thriving for, it is possible in hydroponics, at least with the nutrients. But
the cons of organic nutrients is normally they're very high in sediment, and this makes them dirty your system a lot. It can create a lot of clogs and just problems as with it, because as well as like there it has to get broken down within the system. So you're not adding the nutrients in like the pure form that the plants can easily absorb. You're going to be adding this organic nutrients. Sometimes it's going to have to get broken down a little bit, and then the plants can absorb it. So because of that, it's going to have a lot of inconsistencies. So your pH can fluctuate a lot, and then when you add it, you don't know exactly what nutrients is you're adding and what is going to be in the system at a specific time.
yes, and we've found it to be kind of challenging to use. At least if you're starting off, we would strongly recommend staying away from it. Maybe when you're more seasoned, start to play around with it, because you are going to introduce new problems.
Yes. We love, like we said before, all natural nutrients. We find that it works great. The best actually. It's very easy to maintain. It makes growing very effortless. Now, with this, saying this, is now we're just gonna go one step further in geeking out. And now, with all of these nutrients, now there is one part, there's going to be 2 parts, and 3-part nutrients. And we're just gonna show like the difference between them, and again, what ones we do recommend using.
Yeah, kind of the pros and cons. So one part seems pretty obvious. This is just going to be like one thing that you add to your hydroponic system. Everything is in a premixed solution of all the nutrients as you need, the macro and the micro, and you just have to add that into your system.
Yes. So the pros with this is it's super simple. It's great for beginners. You can just like one thing you have to add. The cons of it is, although it's easy up front, it makes for a lot of work kind of as the plant grows, because when you're adding just one nutrient, as the plant grows, it's going to go need different nutrients and take them up. And when you're just adding one solution, it can kind of throw off the balance, and it'll absorb, like, let's just example, all of the nitrogen, and you're putting more nutrients in, and it's leaving a lot of other nutrients like potassium, and that you get a buildup of potassium because you just keep adding this nutrients and the plant's only taking in nitrogen. That's super simple. That would never happen, but it's just
over time, that's sort of what ends up happening. You get more of something the plant isn't using, and you're just adding more of it into the system, which means you have to clean your system more frequently. And for a lot of people like us, that's work we don't want to do if we can avoid it.
We're lazy growers.
We're lazy growers.
Lazy but efficient.
So one step to try and remove the amount of cleaning you'll have to do is to go to a 2-part. And it's kind of obvious what that is. That's not going to be 2 parts, usually labeled A and B. Again, this is a little bit better because you're going to be able to balance the nutrients depending on the life cycle. So early on, you can say focus more on nitrogen, and then as the plant fruits and flowers, focus more on phosphorus. And you're going to have less unused macro or micronutrients in the water, which means you're not going to have the buildups and have to clean as frequently.
Yes. The cons is, I guess, it's not really a con. It's one more step than the, you're adding one more nutrient solution than you would for the 1 part. And it is still, you're going to get some buildups. You don't have as much control over it, and it's very hard to really optimize your plants and your growing conditions when using a 2-part. So it's still really good. It's still...
Yeah, it still works great.
Yes.
And it obviously is going to cost a little bit more than a 1 part because it's 2 parts. You have to buy 2 things instead of 1 thing.
Yeah, but it's going to last longer. So then next is your 3-part solution. And the 3 parts is 3 parts. And most of the time it's going to be in your grow, your micro, and your bloom. And you're going to mix these into your water solution at various ratios, just depending on the plant's growth stage. And just to answer your question right now, in all of these, depending on what nutrients you get, you will get charts that will tell you exactly the amounts you're going to have to add. That is not something that you'll ever need to know. Just if you can follow directions, you're good to go.
Yes, exactly. And not to get like too deep into the weeds, but the way 3-part works is when you have those micronutrients that you only need to add in small amounts, they've kind of taken that out as its own part, which means that you stop adding way too much of these things you need small, because in a 1-part, you're just always adding them. And you're going to be adding them individually. And that lets you really kind of control what's being added so that you don't risk having to like have way too high of something and have to clean your system more frequently.
Yes, so the 3-part, although there is a lot of work, and really not, you're adding 3 things instead of 1 or 2 things. In the back end, it's a lot less work. So you're gonna have to clean your system a lot less frequently, and the plants are going to thrive. So in the growing, it's actually a lot less work with it.
Yes. However, obviously it is a little more complicated because you're managing 3 things at the same time. It might require a little bit more work to get into the flow of doing things. And it's going to cost more to buy 3 bottles of something than just 1 bottle. But over time, we've found it to be the better of the options if you can kind of get over the initial hurdle of managing those 3 things.
Yeah, we recommend 3-part, and we just do that because your plants grow a lot faster, a lot healthier, and you have a lot more control. So it's easier to kind of force flowering. Just pretty much like growing hydroponically becomes a lot simpler with a 3-part. Our favorite is Hog by Innovative Plants. We love that brand. It works really good. It's very high quality.
Innovative Plant Products.
That's the one.
That's fine. Yeah.
So the next thing, now all about nutrients and the importance of it, we're going to move on to pH. And the scary topic.
The scary. pH gets kind of scary because it sounds chemistry-like and it sounds complicated, like I need to be in university. And the truth is, if you dive into it, it can get a little overwhelming. But we've found a way to understand it that's a lot easier to grasp, and it's really all you need to know when it comes to why and how pH affects your system.
Yes. So with pH, the one thing that you need to really, the only thing that you need to remember is you want it between 5.5 and 6.5. You can get away with 7, but the best is keeping it between 5.5 and 6.5. So instead of getting super sciencey and making it complicated, we are going to keep it simple. So one way to think about it is like a grocery store. So if your pH is between 5.5 and 6.5, it is like walking into a grocery store with fresh produce, and it is widely available. So you can walk in with a cart and you can take what you want, when you want it, and the amounts you need, and there is like no restrictions whatsoever. You go in and go out super, super easily.
Now, if your pH is too high, it's above that 6.5, or it's too low, it's below that 5.5, now it's like going into that same grocery store, but all this produce is actually behind plexiglass. So like it's there, you can see it, but you actually can't access it. There's a barrier that prevents you from actually getting that produce. And that's what's happening when the pH falls out of that range. Yes, the nutrients is in the water, but the plants actually can't uptake it through the roots.
And so that is a super easy way to kind of understand what pH is and how it affects your plants. Biggest thing is just remember 5.5 and 6.5, that's the range you want it, where all of the nutrients are available to the plants to absorb them.
So the next thing that will kind of go in hand when you're learning about nutrients is going to be what's known as EC, or electrical conductivity. And we feel this is kind of one of the most overhyped things when you're learning about hydroponics. And it can be a little bit difficult to understand, but when it boils down to it, as a small scale grower, we find that there's really no need to focus on EC at all.
Yeah, it's unpopular opinion, but it is by far the most reasonable one.
Yes.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is with EC is it doesn't tell you that much about if you measure it, it really doesn't give you any good information you can work with, other than all it's going to tell you is if you have a high EC reading, it just means that you are going to have a high concentration in the water of stuff. And it's not going to tell you what nutrients are in high content, or if it is nutrients, it's just there's a lot of stuff in the water.
And kind of the way it works is pure water doesn't conduct electricity very well. As you add contaminants, particularly salts, it makes the water more conductive. And so they measure how conductive the water is. And if it's more conductive, they're like, oh, there must be more things in it. And that's really all it's kind of telling you. And that's why it can sometimes not really be that useful, because it just means there's contaminants. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the right things in your water.
Yeah, and so if it's low EC, it's just, hey, it's a diluted solution. It's not going to tell you if there is a deficiency in a certain type of nutrients. It's just low. So that's why when on a small scale, we don't think it is important to test, and it's just adding complexity to growing, and it's just one more thing on the checklist that doesn't need to be checked.
Right. So for the most part, you just want to be focusing on your pH, as well as making sure that you're using hydroponic nutrients specified for what you're growing.
Yes.
And that pretty much sums up everything that you need to know specifically with hydroponics when you're adding it to your system, and to kind of know what you're looking at when you start looking at hydroponics nutrients.
Yeah, and so in our next episode, we are going to share all about light. So the different kinds of light, grow lights versus regular lights, and how much light a plant needs.
And if you like this and you want to geek out more into hydroponics, then we recommend checking out our book that we wrote, which is Indoor Garden Hydroponic Secrets. We also have worked really hard with our community to develop indoor garden systems that follow everything that we're talking about, including what we just talked about with nutrients. And you can find those at the same website, that's hopeinnovation.ca. Please give us a like, share us, subscribe to us, follow us, and let your friends and family know about us. And if you can help us grow, we will help you grow.